My name is Evelyn Thorne. I'm 29, and I come from the kind of New England family that hosts charity galas, sends Christmas cards in matching cashmere, and eats resentment for Sunday dinner. My younger sister, Seraphina, is the golden one, charming, delicate, and forever needing saving, while I was raised to be the steady hand, the fixer, the one who never made a scene. I learned early that love in our house came with a scoreboard, and mine was always behind. I worked for an architectural firm, running complex project logistics, a demanding career they dismissed as just office work compared to Seraphina's sporadic, high-profile artistic endeavors. I watched as my father, Victor, paid Seraphina's monthly rent, covered her studio fees, and casually slipped my mother, Sylvia, checks to maintain Seraphina's lifestyle, money that, I knew from my quiet access to the family accounts, was draining resources meant for long-term stability. The true breaking point wasn't one single event, but the agonizing, months-long realization of what they truly saw when they looked at me. It began 6 months before the wedding, when I first quietly consulted an estate attorney. I had discovered a significant detail buried deep within my late grandmother's complex estate plan. As the most financially stable grandchild who had completed a degree in an approved professional field, I was the sole executor and primary fiduciary agent of the Thorne Legacy Trust. This trust was a substantial, multi-million-dollar fund intended as a safety net for all Thorne descendants, but structured with strict clauses regarding financial dependency and ethical conduct. It was the only reason Victor and Sylvia had the liquid assets to consistently prop up Seraphina without touching the principal assets of the family estate. They had relied on me to remain compliant and silent. They had relied on the love I was supposed to feel. So, when the wedding invitations were mailed, I was already moving. While Sylvia obsessed over the seating chart and Seraphina complained about the shade of the bridesmaids' dresses, I was meeting discreetly with notaries, a financial crimes consultant, and Reese's full support. We treated the planning not just as a wedding, but as the meticulous setup of an elaborate, unassailable defense. The car, the generous, newly titled gift from Reese's parents, was the perfect, highly symbolic flashpoint. That's when I drafted the notarized declaration 2 weeks before the ceremony, making the transfer of the vehicle ironclad. I even made a secret, secure copy of the key clause within the Legacy Trust document that defined reckless financial dependency and demonstrated breach of fiduciary trust as grounds for reallocating funds to the next stable relative. The clock was ticking, and the wedding would be my moment. And then my mother leaned in, at the height of our joy, smelling like peonies and control. We're passing the car along to Seraphina. It just makes more sense, sweetie. It was the final confirmation. I reached into my clutch, the paper cool against my fingers. I looked over at Reese, his eyebrow raised in inquiry. The silent question was, "Are you ready to use the weapon we spent 6 months building?" I nodded once. "You're giving away our wedding gift," I said. My voice was calm, steady, charged not with anger, but with the years of quiet preparation. When Seraphina smirked and asked, "Are you serious right now?" I presented the notarized document. The atmosphere in the grand ballroom didn't just drop, it fractured. I watched the sequence of realization, the denial on Sylvia's face, the blank rage on Victor's, and the raw, undiluted shock on Seraphina's. "You're threatening us at your own wedding," Victor spat. "No," I said. "I'm protecting what's mine, something you never taught me to do." The tension peaked when I introduced the second envelope, addressed to Seraphina but handed to Victor. Consider it documentation. This was the public final warning, a symbolic gesture of the legal and financial separation I had been executing in secret. Reese whisked me onto the dance floor. We danced, not for show, for reclamation. The whispers swallowed Seraphina's insults. The music served as the perfect curtain over the family's shattering illusion. I knew the damage wasn't just about the car, it was the public exposure that they, the sophisticated Thornes, had been foiled by the daughter they ignored. The next morning, the social warfare began. Seraphina's desperate, shameful GoFundMe attempt, Sylvia's passive-aggressive social media posts about praying for those who forget where they came from. But I was already gone. Reese and I drove north on our delayed honeymoon, which quickly became a strategic detox. Our drives were less about scenery and more about deconstructing 2 decades of psychological manipulation. At a quiet stop near the coast, I confessed my deeper fears to Reese. They're not just mad I said no. They're terrified I figured out the whole game. They think love is their currency, and now I've devalued it completely. Reese, steady as granite, helped me name the patterns. They didn't want you to be a person, Evelyn. They needed you to be infrastructure. Infrastructure doesn't file papers or feel resentment. It was during a late-night phone call to my Aunt Alara, the emotional, unstable one, that the final plan solidified. Alara, having endured the same dismissiveness years ago, saw the purity of my action. "You didn't just say no," she said, her voice clear despite the miles. "You filed the paperwork. You became your own fortress." She confirmed the financial instability clause in the trust, revealing a key detail. The trust specified that if the primary beneficiaries Vicar and Sylve acted in a way that financially compromised or unjustly exploited the secondary beneficiaries, you and Seraphina, the executor could reallocate the funds to the most independent and stable relative in the event of a breach of fiduciary duty. She paused. "You hold the proof of theft, the proof of exploitation, and the proof of stability. You could transfer the funds." That night, Reese and I worked on the final draft of the trust reallocation documents. It was meticulous, complex, and utterly legal. This wasn't revenge born of emotion, it was justice executed through financial law. The following weeks were marked by the growing panic of the Thornes. The GoFundMe failed spectacularly. Victor's firm began to suffer embarrassing liquidity problems because he had diverted firm resources to quietly cover Seraphina's expenses, counting on the trust to replenish the accounts. Then came Seraphina's text. "Mom's in the hospital. She's not doing well. You should come." I reread the message, sensing the familiar, desperate trigger of guilt. "It's a trap," Reese stated, without needing to look up from the document he was reviewing. "But it's also the stage. It's the only way they can get you isolated and vulnerable." I agreed. The hospital was the final arena of their control. I didn't come for an apology, I came to deliver the definitive consequence. I finalized the trust reallocation paperwork, signed it with a sense of immense, quiet purpose, and had the papers filed. 3 days later, we arrived at the hospital. The environment was meticulously staged. Sylvia, propped up, looking more glamorous patient than genuinely ill. Seraphina, playing the distressed caregiver. "You came?" Sylvia murmured, the shock still evident beneath her performance. I cut through the drama instantly. "Are you okay, Mom?" "I'm stable," she sighed, "but I've been under a lot of stress. You blindsided us, Evelyn. I haven't been able to sleep." "I'm sorry you feel stressed," I replied, my voice empty of sympathy. "But I was under stress for 29 years. I'm just starting to rest." Victor, rigid and fuming, finally stepped forward. "I assume you're here to be civil." "To apologize for that circus at the wedding. I'm here to close the books, Dad." I placed the slim, legal-sized manila envelope on the bedside table. "This is the consequence of your choices." Victor tore open the envelope, expecting perhaps another notarized statement about the car. He didn't find one. He found the instrument of fiduciary reallocation. His hand shook as he read the title. What is this financial jargon?" he demanded. "It's the signed and filed documents for the transfer of the Thorne Legacy Trust funds," I explained, maintaining eye contact. "As the sole executor, and based on the clause detailing demonstrated breach of fiduciary trust, I have exercised the right to reallocate the principal and assets." The color drained from Sylvia's face. Seraphina shrieked, instantly abandoning her role as the concerned sister. "You wouldn't dare touch that." The trust was everything. It wasn't just Seraphina's spending money, it was the foundation of the Thorne image, the source of their endless, unquestioned stability. "I already did," I said. "The new recipient is Aunt Alara Thorne." I explained the details slowly, deliberately, as Victor scanned the legal language. "Alara is financially independent, she is a blood relative, and unlike you, she never used me. She will receive the full dividend every quarter. You three are now fully responsible for every expense you incur, effective today. No more safety net." Victor's face contorted, a mask of aristocratic privilege finally shattering into primitive rage. "You ruthless child, this is abandonment. You are disowning us." "No," I replied, turning to leave, Reese joining my side. "Abandonment was what you did to me every day of my life. This is reclamation." I paused at the door but did not look back at the 3 Thorne figures dissolving into chaos. "I've learned to stop needing you, Mom. That was the whole point of the wedding." The hospital door closed, muting the rising cries of panic and fury. We walked away from the Thorne family legacy, not just financially ruined, but legally stripped of the very foundation of their entitlement. They had expected me to kneel. Instead, I used their own legal structures to dismantle their empire from the inside out. I hadn't burned the house down. I simply cut the power, stepped away, and watched the lights dim forever. The aftermath, the collapse of the Thorne Fade, the immediate aftermath of the hospital confrontation wasn't characterized by angry calls or dramatic pleas. It was marked by a terrifying, profound silence. The Thornes, masters of social theater, were paralyzed by a consequence they could not perform their way out of. Financial ruin, in their elite world, was a terminal disease, one that mandated immediate and total isolation. Reese and I returned to our new life, a cocoon of stability woven from intention and quiet trust. We changed our home's security codes, updated our contact lists to only include Alara, and deleted all social media applications. We were not running, we were securing the borders of our peace. A week passed before the first ripple of their collapse reached me. It was not a message from my parents, but a terse, formal email from Victor's longtime legal counsel, Mr. Hemlock. The tone was professional, yet laced with a palpable desperation. Subject: urgent inquiry regarding Thorne Legacy Trust distribution protocol. Miss Thorne, we must urgently arrange a meeting to discuss the purported reallocation of the Legacy Trust. Mr. and Mrs. Thorne require immediate clarity regarding the third quarter distributions, which have been unexpectedly rerouted. You are aware of the substantial financial arrangements dependent upon these funds. Any unilateral action taken without the consensus of all beneficiaries will be met with the appropriate legal challenge. I forwarded the email to my own attorney, Miss Dubois, with a single, cool instruction: defend my fiduciary decision with extreme prejudice. Attach the notarized evidence of Seraphina's financial recklessness and Victor's own commingling of personal and trust funds. The legal fight that ensued wasn't a skirmish, it was a scorched earth legal war waged by Victor to reclaim his stolen safety net. But I held every piece of verifiable truth. My defense relied entirely on the family's years of toxic behavior, Seraphina's history of massive, undisclosed debts paid by the trust funds, Victor's unauthorized loans from the trust to stabilize his own failing wealth management firm, and the final, egregious attempt to steal the wedding. Carr, proving a pattern of entitlement and breach of trust. Victor lost. The court ruled decisively in my favor, upholding the reallocation of the principal to Aunt Alara. The ruling was the final, non-negotiable legal confirmation of their moral failure. The effect on the Thorne family was swift and catastrophic. The financial collapse, without the quarterly distributions from the trust, Victor and Sylvia could no longer maintain their highly leveraged lifestyle. The prestigious New England home, the one where I was lectured on being the steady hand, was the first to go. It wasn't sold privately and discreetly, it was foreclosed upon. The public auction, covered obliquely in the local society pages as a distressed asset sale, was a devastating public humiliation. Victor, unable to reconcile the reality with his ego, tried to blame market volatility, but the whispers in their elite circles knew better. The daughter they dismissed bankrupted them. Seraphina's descent, Seraphina's curated artistic life evaporated instantly. Her upscale studio rent was 3 months past due. Her credit cards, once routinely paid by Victor, maxed out. She had never managed her own life, finances, or consequences. She tried to leverage her social connections, but the shame surrounding the foreclosure and the trust scandal was too great. She moved out of her chic apartment and into a small, temporary living situation with 2 volatile roommates, a dizzying fall from the height of privilege. Her final message to me arrived on a burner phone. "You broke us. You are nothing but spite." I deleted the message without opening it. Spite requires emotional energy. This was simple, elegant mathematics. Sylvia's social exile, Sylvia, whose entire identity was built on hosting galas and managing appearances, became a social ghost. Her phone stopped ringing. Her RSVP invitations dried up. She, the matriarch who had preached the importance of family image, found herself on the outside, forced to watch her carefully constructed life crumble. She and Victor downsized dramatically, moving to a small, isolated condo far from their old haunts. The silence of their new life the most profound punishment of all. They were no longer the Thornes, they were just a couple of older people with too many bills and nowhere to go for help. The fallout period lasted 6 intense months. Reese and I watched the spectacle from a distance, like observing a slow-motion car crash. We were vigilant, aware that true narcissists often escalate their efforts when cornered. But their desperation was genuine. They lacked the ability to generate wealth or stability on their own. They only knew how to consume what was provided. When the pipeline dried up, they were left stranded. The ascendants, building the fortress of self. The quiet after the collapse was the most restorative phase of my life. With the immense weight of family obligation lifted, my professional life underwent a rapid, explosive transformation. The energy I had spent defending myself, managing family crises, and anticipating the next demand was now channeled entirely into my architectural firm. My original role at the firm, Director of Project Logistics, was demanding, but I had always felt confined by its structure. The finality of the break with the Thornes unlocked a profound ambition. I realized that my most valuable skill wasn't just fixing things, it was analyzing the underlying structure, identifying the weak points, and rebuilding them into unassailable fortresses. This was the exact skill set I had used to dismantle my own family's foundation. Within 3 months of the trust reallocation, I presented a radical proposal to the firm's senior partners. We are bottlenecked by our reactive project management, I argued, laying out a meticulously detailed 15-page plan. We chase deadlines, we absorb losses from external delays, and we fail to monetize our expertise in structural resilience. My proposal was to found a new division, Thorne Architectural Resilience Consulting. The division would not design buildings, it would audit, stress test, and preemptively fortify existing major structural and financial projects against catastrophic failure. It was high-stakes, high-fee work, appealing directly to megaprojects, government facilities, and large-scale corporate clients terrified of unforeseen collapse, the infrastructure clients. "It's too specialized, Evelyn," one partner warned. "The risk is enormous. The risk is our specialty," I countered, leaning forward. My entire life has been spent identifying the single point of failure and ensuring it doesn't take down the entire system. I know how things collapse. I know the legal and financial triggers that precede structural failure. That knowledge is invaluable. The partners were swayed by the sheer, unblinking confidence of my presentation. They greenlit TARC, making me the managing partner and chief resilience officer, a title I cherished as it defined the person I had become. TARC became an instant, spectacular success. My expertise in anticipating betrayal and structural flaws, honed by years of managing the Thornes' instability, translated perfectly into high-stakes corporate consulting. I didn't see walls and budgets, I saw leaks and vulnerabilities. I saw where the systems were being leveraged for personal gain, where the Seraphinuses of the corporate world were hiding their waste, and where the victors were bending the rules until the entire structure fractured. My income tripled within the first year. Reese, a supportive partner in his own career as a data analyst, took immense pride in my explosive professional ascent. Our life together wasn't extravagant. It was built on quality, intention, and a shared quiet security. We bought a beautiful home with a view of the harbor, a house designed with open spaces, clean lines, and crucially, no hidden financial dependencies. It was a fortress of self-worth. The narrative surrounding Evelyn Thorne shifted entirely. I was no longer the quiet fixer. I was the brilliant, ruthless architect, the woman who took no prisoners in business because she had learned the price of false kindness in her own life. I sometimes received social invitations from my former social circles. They were tentative, testing the waters. I replied to everyone with a single, polite, and firm no. I had no interest in entering any room where my presence was conditional on my past. The only Thorne I maintained contact with was Alara. Our relationship, built on shared truth and validated suffering, was a rare, beautiful thing. The trust funds provided Alara with the financial security she had been denied by Victor and Sylvia's emotional sabotage. She used the money wisely, establishing a nonprofit art collective focused on empowering women artists who had been emotionally stifled by family expectations. The unburdening, the truth, and the real family. 3 years after the wedding, Reese and I hosted a small, intimate dinner party at our new home. The guest list was meticulously curated. Reese's brother, my closest work partner from TARC, and, most importantly, Aunt Alara. The dinner was warm, filled with genuine laughter, the kind of easy, flowing joy that had been entirely absent from any meal at the Thorne house. Later that evening, after the other guests had left, Alara and I sat on the porch, watching the harbor lights reflect on the dark water. "You know," Alara began, her voice soft but clear, "the most generous thing you did wasn't giving me the money, Evelyn. It was giving me the voice. You always had the voice, Alara. They just convinced you to be quiet." "Perhaps," she conceded. "But you were the first to break the silence so loudly that they couldn't just dismiss the sound." I saw the look on Sylvia's face at the hospital. It wasn't just the money. It was the realization that you were better than them, and you proved it on their own terms. I took a deep breath. "There's one thing I never told you, Alara. One detail I kept to myself. I described the letter I found years ago, the one she wrote to Sylvia after the car accident, detailing how Sylvia only defended what was convenient, always protecting Seraphina at everyone else's expense. I found it when I was 16, I confessed. I never told anyone I read it. But that was the first day I realized I wasn't imagining things. You were my secret witness, long before the wedding." Alara's eyes filled with tears, but her expression was one of profound relief. "Oh, my dear girl. I thought I was insane, writing that in the dark, wondering if I was the only one who saw the scoreboarding. You weren't. You showed me the truth wasn't personal. It was the family blueprint." We sat in comfortable silence for a while. This was the true closure, not the legal victory, but the shared validation of two people who had once been marginalized by the same toxic system. The final encounter. The final, bizarre chapter of the Thorne saga occurred 4 years after the wedding. Reese and I were attending a major architectural conference in Boston. I was the keynote speaker, addressing a crowd of 2,000 executives on resilience by design, structuring against predictable failure. As I stepped off the stage, exhilarated, I saw him, Victor Thorne. He was sitting alone in the last row, his suit rumpled, his face showing the harsh lines of age and, finally, defeat. He looked small, insignificant, and completely out of place in the high-stakes, successful environment of the conference. He waited until the crowd dispersed, then approached me, his shoulders hunched. He didn't try to boom or command. "Evelyn," he said, his voice a hoarse whisper. "That was impressive, very successful." "Thank you, Victor," I replied, my voice professional, detached. I offered him no warmth, no familiar access. We need to talk. We need to reset this. We're your family." We talked, Victor. In a courtroom, and then in a hospital room. The conversation is over. He tried to muster some pity. "We lost everything, Evelyn. Everything. Your mother is sick with worry. Seraphina can't hold a job. Surely, you see the consequences of your actions." I looked at him, not with malice, but with a cold, clear assessment, the way I would look at a compromised building foundation. The consequences of my actions were success, security, and integrity. The consequences of your actions were that your entitlement outstripped your assets. You didn't lose everything. You simply lost what you were never truly capable of holding on to. He stared at me, searching for the crack, the guilt, the pity that had defined our relationship for 3 decades. He found nothing but the polished, impenetrable surface of the woman who had used his own rules to set herself free. "You broke your family," he whispered. A final, desperate attempt to assign blame. You built a family designed to use me, Victor, I countered. I simply refuse to continue being the labor. If you want a life, build it yourselves. I did. I turned, took Reese's arm, and walked away from the ghost of the Thorne patriarch. The escape wasn't just physical or financial, it was the final, total surrender of my emotional responsibility to them. I had paid the price of their neglect with years of my life, but I was done paying their bills. The wedding car was just a symbol, the trust was the instrument, but the real victory was the silence, the absolute, permanent stillness that finally settled over my life, a silence they could never penetrate. It was the only sound of genuine, unburdened peace.